Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time it is in the world, wherever you are tuning in from. I'm joined today by Gemma Stevenson. I say today in Europe and also in the UK, where Gemma is, it is evening. How are you, Gemma?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. A little bit of Grand Slam fatigue, maybe, but the tennis world never stops, whether that be the men's singles, the women's singles, the men's doubles, women's doubles. But also, there are other forms of the sport, Gemma, that I'm sure many people are not so aware of. And that's what I'd like you to do for us today is to add a bit of color and also explain what is going on, for example, with wheelchair tennis, etc. So, first of all, tell us, who are you, Gemma?
So, I'm Gemma Stevenson. I work as a tennis coach. I'm also a wheelchair tennis player, and I also work as a tennis journalist. So, I go around all the Grand Slams and the major events on the wheelchair tennis tour specifically, but I do also provide analysis on the ATP and WTA tour, mostly the WTA as well, because women in sport, we need to be bigging those up as well. And I'm also a tennis referee.
Oh,
So
really?
I'm on both sides, the player side and the referee side.
Yeah. When you say referee, do you mean like you're backstage making decisions, big calls, for example, whether over the weather or this kind of thing?
Yeah, so I do more refereeing at grassroots level,
Hmm.
particularly so here in the UK, the LTA have something called youth match plays, which is
Okay.
designed to encourage children, whether they play on their feet or they play in a wheelchair or they play with an adapted tennis ball like VI players play, um, with kind of a bell in the ball, whatever
Okay.
the age they are and however they play the sport. These LTA youth match plays are designed because a lot of children have coaching for tennis, but not a lot decide to go and compete. And these LTA youth match plays are like a really informal way of competing. So, sort of in the middle Sunday of Wimbledon, I went back to Peterborough and did an LTA youth match play that was Wimbledon themed. We had a team challenge. We had Team Andy Murray and Team Alfie Hewett, and the winning team got like grips for their rackets and medals. And even the team that came second, because I always say come second, I don't say lost, I say come second, got prizes as well. So we did all of that. I did that on the middle Sunday of Wimbledon amongst everything else that was going on. So it's
Okay.
more grassroots level. So I'm an R5 referee, which means
Okay.
I can referee up to grade 3 competition here in the UK. So, but I really love doing the LTA youth match plays because what it does is it brings people into competing. It's not like that formal competition that gets you your kind of ranking, your LTA ranking or your world tennis number. It's basically just introducing kids to competition, um, to make it fun for them. So there's not the pressure that you kind of have at the Grand Slams and the kind of more elite level of the sport.
If there was somebody watching right now and they were interested in picking up a racket from a wheelchair, for example, perspective, what can they do? I mean, obviously you're more familiar with the UK scene, but perhaps there are crossovers in other countries too.
I'd say you don't even need to be near a tennis court to actually start playing tennis. You can do something called tap up. So get yourself a racket and a ball. It doesn't need to be an expensive racket like you see the pros use. Probably when you're further along in your tennis journey, yes, you need a better racket. But literally, go into a shop or go online and buy a cheap racket, buy a cheap set of balls, go into your garden or even in your living room. I mean, one thing the pandemic taught us is we can do things in our houses. So, I mean, I can remember I wasn't allowed on court for a lot of the pandemic. There was a period where disabled athletes were allowed on court here in the UK, but for most of it, we weren't. I literally blew up a balloon and had my tennis racket. The balloon was so that I didn't kind of start wrecking my mum's house. I don't think she would have appreciated her vases going everywhere as I hit tennis balls. But it's things like, you can hit against a wall, um, bounce the ball on the floor. Those are all rallies as well. I think that's what people don't realize about tennis. It's often seen as a very elite sport and a very expensive sport. And don't get me wrong, wheelchair tennis, when you're involved in it and you have to start, I mean, most clubs have a couple of wheelchair tennis chairs that people who are just starting can try in if you go along to a club. But the big expense is the wheelchair, because you always say that when you're a standing player or a pedestrian player, as I call them, you basically have the cost of shoes. When you're a wheelchair player, you have the cost of shoes and the wheelchair. And now I don't have a particularly fancy. I do have a RGK Grand Slam, which is what you see a lot of the players playing.
Okay.
But mine's like kind of the original model. I haven't gone up to the more expensive models, but even that cost me like 7 grand for my wheelchair. So I think what a lot of people don't realize is there's a lot of cost, but also what a lot of people don't realize is there are ways to help cover that cost. So because I work as a coach as well, so having a wheelchair is a part of my job. I get some of it funded by Access to Work, which is a fund here in the UK that the government run, which is designed to help with the extra costs of being disabled and getting you in work or keeping you in work. But then also there's trusts and funds. I mean, here over in the UK, my coaching pathway and a lot of my coaching qualifications have been part funded by the LTA, because they have a disability grant system that helps pay like half of the cost. And then also we have the Dan Maskell Trust over here in the UK that really, really helps grassroots sort of disability tennis. So that's not just wheelchair tennis, that's VI tennis, deaf tennis, and learning disability tennis. So there are ways to get funding to kind of cut those costs down. And obviously my first tennis wheelchair was not £7,000. That's something I've got, sort of after 6 years of playing. Where I knew how I played and I knew how I wanted my chair set up.
Okay.
The first chair I got was £500, which is still quite expensive, but it was set up so that I could change things around, so like where the foot plate was and where my backrest was and how high my backrest was, so that when I came to get what I have now, which is a fixed frame wheelchair, which can't be changed, I had a good idea of how I needed my wheelchair set up.
Gemma, can you explain a little bit as well the differences between a regular wheelchair and the wheelchair you would need on a tennis court?
Yeah, so if you look at my day chair that I use in everyday life, the kind of wheels are straight up and down. And they don't have on them at the back something called an anti-tip, which is this
Okay.
little extra wheel at the back that stops you kind of flipping backward. Now,
Okay.
I've been using a day chair for a long time, so I don't use an anti-tip in my day chair. It helps me get over curbs and stuff a lot easier. So in my everyday life, it helps not to have that anti-tip. But if I attempted to serve without that anti-tip, it wouldn't end well. It would be bottom in the air, um, chair on floor, and me asking for help to try and get up. So the big major changes in the sports chair, you do tend to have a lower backrest because you need to have. So I have quite a high backrest because I've got no core stability. So I've got no core stability because of my disability. So I have a higher backrest, but it's still not as high as my day chair rest, and that's so that enables me to do a bit of to have that swing and be able to hit the shots. I have that anti-tip to stop me kind of falling out of it and to balance
Hmm.
me out. And I have cambered wheels. So what wheels mean is they're at an angle, and they're at an angle because that helps you turn more quickly and kind of move faster around the court, really.
Gemma, tell us about the growth of the sport. Where are we at right now compared to a few years ago? But also, where should we be going with it?
Yeah, I think the growth of the sport. I mean, I think we saw it in Wimbledon this year, didn't we? I mean, that Saturday night men's wheelchair doubles final between Alfie Hewett and Gordon Reid, there was 10,000 people in court one.
Okay.
They gave Gordon and Alfie, when they won match point, a complete standing ovation. That's 10,000 people. That's something you don't see on the tour week in, week out. That is quite unique. But Wimbledon took a risk and put it on court one, and not just one match. They put, I think it was 5 or 6 matches across the 5 days of the tournament. They put those number of matches on court number one, and even Alfie's singles final the following day, it was packed, and you just heard the noise and the appreciation for wheelchair tennis. People who come to Wimbledon and they were watching it and enjoying it. And arguably, I'd say, I know Alcaraz and Djokovic were a big headliner, but I think the match that made most difference at Wimbledon this year for inclusion was that um, wheelchair doubles final between Alfie and Gordon, because not only was it well turned out and loads of people turned up for it. It was an incredible display of athleticism and incredible tennis, where you played 3 sets where momentum was shifting constantly and you didn't know who was going to win, and you saw the players working out. So you saw that tennis, whether it's played on wheels or on your feet, it's just tennis. I mean, yes, there is one difference in rule, which is wheelchair players are allowed 2 bounces.
Okay.
So you might seen people take it. You might have seen Alfie and Gordon take a shot after 2 bounces and gone, well, why is that allowed? So in wheelchair tennis, the one rule change is the 2 bounce rule. But other than that, it was exactly the same sort of contest you saw Alcaraz and Djokovic doing 24 hours later. And I think that's what people began to appreciate when they watched that, and they saw that, the LTA have a hashtag called "It's Just Tennis," and that's really what it is. Regardless of how you do it, it's just tennis.
Okay, that's interesting. What about so there's no other sort of rule changes in terms of the serve or anything like this?
No, so I mean, there's some people like me, so I have a restriction in my arm. So you are allowed to use an adapted serve. So you might see some people. I know Nick Kyrgios causes a lot of controversy over his good old underarm serve, but especially in the quad division of wheelchair tennis, you may see some people doing underarm serves when they're serving, which is
Hmm.
completely allowed anyway in tennis. But
Yeah.
it's just because you don't see it as much in the standing game, it feels more weird. But a lot of quad players do, because they have restrictions in their shoulders and stuff. But it's not really a rule change. It's not, you are allowed to underarm serve in standing tennis, so it's not a rule change. So really, the beauty of wheelchair tennis is the only rule change is 2 bounces. So like when I play, even at my local club at grassroots level, I play with the standing players, and the only difference is that I get 2 bounces, they get 1. I mean, a lot of them say that I'm cheating and they should get 2 bounces too. But I just tell them, nah, they don't. They're not good enough, so they don't get 2 bounces.
Gemma, before we get into some of the results and some of the things that occurred over the last week or so at Wimbledon, tell us what is the basic difference between quads? You mentioned them just now, and also before we went on air. You said don't forget the quads as well, because I'm sure many people are not specifically familiar with all the different forms of wheelchair tennis.
Yeah, so unlike athletics and everything, where you watch the Paralympics and you have to start getting used to up to 80 categories, in wheelchair tennis, there's 2 divisions. So there's the open division, which means the lower limbs affected only, so the legs basically.
Hmm.
And then they have another division called the quad division, which is for more disabled athletes, which is the lower body plus at least one upper limb significantly affected by
Got it.
their disability. So you'll often see in the quad division players, because they haven't got grip, taping their racket to the hand.
Hmm.
So um, so they do that because they can. It's an adaptation to be able to play tennis. So when they say everybody can play tennis, there's probably an adaptation to make you. I mean, I coach a lot, and I have a lot of people say, I can't grip, and I say, well, neither can I. So I tape my racket to my hand.
Hmm.
It's a bit of a pain because you can't change your grip when you're
Hmm.
playing. So you have to learn the grip that works best for you to perform both a forehand and a backhand and a volley and the serve, and and you have to learn to make every part of the game effective with just one grip basically. So you'll often see people like that. I'd urge people also, you will see adapted serves, so I would urge people to get online and Google a player who's now retired, but he's a legend within the quad division, Nick Taylor. He couldn't use his arms to serve, so he used to do the ball toss for his serve using his legs, and he used to toss the ball up for a serve, and then hit it with a racket, obviously, but it used to come from his legs. And the guy, the amount of technique he has in his serve, there was I think during the pandemic there was the bottle top challenge, and he actually did it. And he was the one player who kind of did it first off because he knew his serve and his ball toss so well. He's one of the legends within quad wheelchair tennis, and yeah, he people like Lucas Satoli, who used one hand to serve and hit the ball with a racket. So you see all sorts of adaptations that you probably go, oh, that's a really way. So when people are first taking up wheelchair tennis, if I'm coaching them, I'll say, Look at players like Nick Taylor, like Lucas Sitoli, like David Wagner, like Andy Lapthorne, and if they do have an impairment that affects their upper body, I say look at them, see if any of their adaptations work for you, because there are so many trailblazers in the sport from the beginning. That's not saying there's no more new adaptations to be found, but because you're coming at it sort of 30, 40 years later, there are some that exist. And you know what? It might be that you actually find a new adaptation. I mean, one of my major problems is that I have quite a restriction in my wrist. So generating topspin is quite hard for me in that lower part of the arm. So me and my coach have worked to find an adapted way for me that works for me to help me generate topspin. And I also have an hearing impairment, so I don't actually hear the ball. I can't hear the ball. So we say something. He'll say to me, "Did you feel the twinkle?" So it's about it's about the vibrations that go up my arm. So if I feel like a twinkly sensation, so that's what we mean by feel the twinkle, that means I've hit the ball with topspin. If it feels a little more like a straight thud, I've basically just whacked it. And just kind of gone, I've got the ball, it's over the net, I don't really care. So it's kind of like, even if you talk to individual wheelchair tennis players, because of the way our disabilities affect us, and a lot of disabled people have more than one disability. So we often have to create our own adaptations as well to kind of work with the variation of disabilities that we have.
Gemma, before we get into it, I said this 5 minutes ago, but I'm going to say it again. I do want to. You talked about some of the legends and some of the people that have transcended this version of the sport. Alfie Hewett is somebody who probably is the first name that crosses many people's minds. Not just for his achievements on court, but maybe that downing of the beer in New York a couple of years ago, I think, on TV.
When he legally could.
Yeah.
I
So
think
go
I
on.
think I remember interviewing Alfie when he won his first US Open title, and I completely forgot, because I was in my mid-20s by that point, and I completely forgot that he couldn't legally drink in New York. So I did genuinely ask him, like, if he was going out for a drink that night, and he was like, "Well, no, I can't." And I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh yeah, no, you can't. You're not 21." So I think I completely forgot, because it hadn't crossed my mind, because I was over the 21 threshold. And I think in my head, coming from the UK, I was thinking 18 anyway. So yeah, I can always remember asking that question. And
I'm
that's
sure
when,
you were thinking of it when he was drinking that beer a few years later.
yeah, I was thinking, oh, it's so different from the first. It's so different from the first interview I did with him when he won the US Open for the first time.
Okay, I'm just actually going to bring up an image of him with that beer from New York. But we'll come back to Alfie in a minute, because, of course, he was a part of the story at Wimbledon this year as well. But I want to first start off in terms of the results. The women's singles.
Oh, that's not Alfie drinking beer. That's Dylan Alcott.
It's Dylan Alcott. That's my bad.
Yeah.
That's my bad.
Yeah.
Dylan Alcott drinking the beer. Sorry, Alfie, or sorry, Dylan as well, for taking the glory away from you. Let's get to the women's singles, if you don't mind. Didier de Groot winning there, and tell me about her and her journey.
I mean, she's a dominant force in the women's game. Like, there is another women's legend who came before her called Esther Vergeer. I don't know whether you've heard that name. I mean, she went something like 10 years unbeaten in singles. It was something like 400 odd matches unbeaten. She retired unbeaten. She has, Dida and Esther, and indeed Aniek and Yiska, they are a product of the Dutch system of tennis, which
Okay.
is a fantastic setup. I mean, if you look at the nations that are doing well in wheelchair tennis right now, Netherlands always up there, Great Britain always up there, and also now Japan. I mean, you've only got to think of Shingo Kaneda, who retired, Yui Kamiji, who often ends up in finals with Dida, but didn't at Wimbledon, because Yiska came back, and she's already a singles title winner at Wimbledon, and she beat Yui in the semi-finals, and young gun Takito Oda, who beat
Yeah.
Alfie in the Wimbledon singles final. There are some countries that are doing really great things for wheelchair tennis, and it is their setup. I think one of the things that the Netherlands does, which maybe other countries could look at, and I'm talking to you, Great Britain, as well, is they give children who have a disability or people who become disabled a basic sports chair as well. I think it's from talking to the Dutch girls previously, it's come from a belief that if they allow somebody to be active from an early age, it has so many health benefits, not just physical benefits, but mental health benefits as well. So a lot has come from that, and I think that's maybe part of their success as a country. But if you look in every division, the Dutch are dominant. If you look in the men's division, you've got Dutch men in the top 10. The quad division, Sam Schroeder and Niels Vink are the top 2 in the world, and they look unbeatable. They're not unbeatable, as Wimbledon proved, but they look unbeatable on paper. And Dida, I mean, she's gone over 100 singles matches unbeaten. You have to go back to January 2020 at the Australian Open to the last time she was beaten at a Grand Slam. She did the Golden Slam the year of Tokyo. She followed that up with a calendar slam, and she's won the first 3 slams this year. That could be 3 years in a row. She's just completely dominated Grand Slam stage. She's a fantastic athlete, and what she does for women's wheelchair tennis is amazing because she really puts it on the map. She always is very honest and very truthful in her press conferences. She'll say when she's not had a good match. You kind of sometimes you can tell when she's on court. You can see from her facial expressions she's really not having a good serving day today, and you can ask her about it, and she'll always answer it. In fact, she likes it. I think she's been very open and honest because a lot of questions are asked because she's following in Esther Vergeer's footsteps, and a lot of questions are asked of her of can you break Esther's record of how many titles she got, how many Grand Slams she got? Can you do that? And I think she's always very honest, and she says, I like to set my own records because if I make my career aim what Esther's achieved and I don't achieve it, I won't fully appreciate what I have achieved. And I think that's a good way to think about it because actually, I spoke to her after she achieved the Golden Slam, and it's something because wheelchair tennis singles wasn't in every Grand Slam when Esther was playing. It was something that she's achieved and she's achieved alone that no woman has ever achieved in the sport, and that's because we then now have wheelchair singles at all the Grand Slams. So
when did that change, if you don't mind me asking, Sheba?
So Wimbledon were the last to introduce singles, which was 2016.
Oh, wow.
And that was men's and open only. And then the quad division weren't even a part of Wimbledon until so they did an exhibition in 2018, and then it was a full event from 2019. So Wimbledon were the last to add a singles event. I think a lot of it was to do with because realistically, the warm-up events to Wimbledon, so Eastbourne and Queen's and Wimbledon itself, are the only real grass court tournaments there are on the wheelchair tennis tour.
Okay.
So what you're looking at is the top 8 are the only real people that get a competitive tournament on grass. So the top 8 in the world are the only ones. But I think there was a mixture of, we saw this year at Wimbledon that the rain stopped play so many days, and it completely mucked around with the scheduling and how many courts the championships needed to use, even into the second week. I mean, even into sort of Friday semi-finals day, men's semi-finals day, there was a whole catch-up day on Saturday because, I mean, I know there were only 2 wheelchair tennis matches played. They're 2 ladies ones because they could get them on court number 1. So Saturday then proved to be. So I think it was also because of the space at Wimbledon and scheduling and stuff. But the one credit is there's a guy called Jamie Baker at Wimbledon who does a lot for wheelchair tennis, and he listens to wheelchair tennis players, and he listens to what they want and what they need. And he's been kind of really groundbreaking at Wimbledon because he's really passionate about wheelchair tennis as well and showing it on the big stages. He's a big part in how they've got a court 1 match and how they've got the matches they have.
Let's move on to the men's singles. We did touch on it briefly, but a certain person from Japan
Yeah.
has decided to tear up some of the record books at Wimbledon this year, partly because of his age, in fact, primarily because of his age. Oda Tokito, as I said, of Japan, it's his second Grand Slam, obviously following up his recent success as well at the French Open. Give me a word on him, but I also like what you were saying about some of the attitudes towards wheelchair tennis regarding Japan, but also the Netherlands, and maybe how other countries can follow in their footsteps.
Yeah, I mean, Taquito is on another level. Like, the stuff he is doing, we've not seen in wheelchair tennis before, and I think that's why people are finding him quite difficult to beat. Now I mean, he hasn't even done a full season in the senior Grand Slams, and he's already won two. Do you know what I mean? He was in the men's US Open last year, and he has done Roland Garros before, but he didn't even do a full season. Like, it, those of us who follow wheelchair tennis have followed his junior career, and we
Mm-hmm.
knew he was something special coming up. And we kind of knew once he hit the men's seniors ranks, it wouldn't be long before he was in at least Grand Slam finals. He seems to push the boundaries of what's possible in wheelchair tennis. And if you look at Alfie Hewett, who he was partnered with in who he played against in the Australian Open final at the beginning of the year, because every
Mm-hmm.
Grand Slam final is between Taquito and Alfie this season. If you look at the level of tennis Taquito and Alfie were playing in Australia, for both of them, the level that we saw in Wimbledon was hugely different. And actually, I would argue Alfie's a better player than he was at the Australian Open. And
Okay.
that's what I think this is a rivalry we really need to watch. And it's a really interesting rivalry because they both bring out the best in each other. Because as with all rivalries, Alfie goes back and works, Taquito goes back and works, and you just see new things and everything like that. So it's just it's very good to see that even now we're still innovating in wheelchair tennis about what we can do. And Taquito and Alfie are very much at the front of that. I did have a conversation with Alfie on Sunday after he lost the final, and I said it seems like his intention is to beat every record you've set.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the thing.
I mean, Alfie's still 25, so there's plenty of tennis left in him yet.
Oh,
That's
no,
for
yeah,
sure.
like, obviously, when Taquito won, they were like a bit like they did with Alcaraz and Djokovic. They
Mm-hmm.
said, "Oh, the future is now, the next generation's coming." I'm like, "No, hang on a minute. It's not like Alfie's 36, 37.
Right.
He's
Yeah.
25 years old.
Yeah.
This is like he's technically I would count him as the same generation as Taquito,
Yeah.
because what's what they're a product of is more the sport has become more professional over time. It's the one disability sport where people can earn a living outside of, it's not just something they have to go and do and they don't win prize money. In the wheelchair tennis tour, they earn prize money and they can earn a living out of it and they get sponsorship deals. And they are both a product of the fact that the senior level of the tour became more professional and a lot more was invested into the junior level of the tour, and there's a lot more juniors now competing. So I would count them as the same generation. I certainly didn't write it's the new generation, because actually, realistically, if you look at it, there's like 7 years between them. It's
Right.
not it's not that much, is it really?
And we're on this topic of Alfie Hewett again, but I think we have to mention him. He may have had a bit of disappointment in the singles, but he made up for that, of course, in the doubles, regaining their Wimbledon crown alongside, of course, Gordon Reid. Let's have a word for Gordon as well as Alfie and their run to the doubles title.
Yeah, I think the great thing is about this year. So last year, Gordon had a lot of wrist injuries.
Okay.
He ended up taking the end of season out, and he was only really competing in Grand Slams. He wasn't playing a lot along the tour, and then he took some time out after the US Open last year, and he took some time out to get his wrist better. He is honest, and he says he wasn't sure whether he was going to be able to come back to tennis, but he was, luckily. And this season, we've seen him back to his best. I mean, if you watched him take on Gustavo Fernandez, I mean, one thing that will probably have helped his confidence is he has never lost to Gustavo Fernandez on grass. So he was going into that semi-final that quarter-final meeting knowing that he's got a good record against him on the surface. But whatever surface you're playing on, Gustavo Fernandez is not is quite daunting to take on. So you
Okay.
saw him at Wimbledon, you've seen him at Roland Garros, and you've seen him at Australian Open this year. He seems back to where he was, and this is the thing, because he's able to play more events as well. I mean, again, Alfie and Gordon haven't been beaten this season in doubles. Like when you talk about a dominant force, they are it. They're the ones that everybody wants to beat. You know, when Martin De La Puente and Gustavo Fernandez take them on, they want to beat them. When Takita Oda and Takuya Miki took them on in that final, they wanted to beat them because they want to be that pair that beat them this year because nobody else has done it. And I think, you know, that's now their 5th Wimbledon title together. So when you talk about dominant forces within a game, if you look at the men's wheelchair tennis doubles, they really are the ones to kind of beat. And again, you know, a lot's come out of that partnership. That partnership hasn't just happened overnight. That partnership has been building for, I think it's probably about 10 years now.
Okay.
When Alfie was still, you know, quite young and still competing in the juniors. And then you look at them because there's an event in wheelchair tennis called the Wheelchair World Team Cup, which is like the Billie Jean Cup and the Davis Cup. And this year, GB won it. The GB men won it. And what you had in that team was a mixture of experience, like Gordon and Alfie, with the youth that are coming through in Ben Bartram. And you know, if you talk to the young British players, especially the British boys players, they look up to Gordon and Alfie for what they've achieved.
And on the women's doubles, we had another return to the victory podium, if you like, for Diede de Groot, alongside Jiski Griffionen. I'm probably butchering that surname in particular. I apologize for that. And they defeated Yu Kamichi and Kotaso Montiana or something like this. They won in straight sets. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, KG, I call her KG. People who know her call her
Maybe
KG.
easy.
She's Kotatsu Monchane, but we all
Okay,
call her
thank you.
KG. She is KG. She's a legend. We love her. And she, her and Yui actually first got together at Roland Garros. They won the title. Didier and Yusko got a bit of revenge at Wimbledon. It is a different surface. I think that's what we've got to remember in wheelchair tennis, just as there is in the
I was
ATP.
going to ask you about that, Gemma. Are there big differences like we see in other forms of the sport as well with the surfaces?
Yeah, and one of the biggest differences, so in wheelchair tennis, you're always encouraged to keep the chair moving because the first push, whether you're using a day chair or a sports chair, is the hardest push for a wheelchair user. So you're encouraged to keep the chair moving. Grass doesn't help you do that because the friction between the wheels and the grass means that you do a push and you practically stop,
Mm,
even on Wimbledon grass. So KG actually has a really good game for grass. She's a bit like, I would describe her as a bit like Rebecca in the women's draw, in that she has quite a big serve
okay.
that can cause damage. She has one of the biggest serves in the women's game. And Yui had done something new to a chair. I don't know what she'd done, but it felt like she was a bit off balance. But again, KG and Yui have won a Grand Slam title this year, you know, and it was KG's first ever Grand Slam at Roland Garros. But again, like those Dutch girls, they train together. You know, Yui's Japanese and KG's South African. How often
Okay.
can they get to play together, really,
Mm,
in between this? I mean, what happens is if a good, solid Grand Slam doubles partnership starts up in the Super Series, which is the level below Grand Slams, and the other ITF levels, you tend to find that people will partner up with who they're planning. You know, like I've said, you know, in the men's, we have Gordon and Alfie partnering up a lot. It makes such a difference when you're playing with somebody from the same country as you because you get to train together. Dida and Yiska are very good friends. You know, they are very good friends as well. Yui and KG are good friends, and that tends to work in wheelchair tennis. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't. I've seen some, especially in the quads division, I've seen some partnerships where you think it's going to work because they're really good friends, and it just doesn't. But I won't mention those partnerships, but they know who they are really. But I think that's the thing. I would I think if those two partnerships end up in the doubles final for the US Open, we we could find a different winner. It could be the same winners, but I think it will be a very different match because of that surface difference. You know, it the surface does make a difference to you. And if you're not used to playing on the grass, I get asked to go and do wheelchair tennis demos for Cambridgeshire because I live in Cambridgeshire, and CAMS LTA often ask me. And some clubs ask me to come and do them. And I ask what surface it is. And if they say to me artificial grass or grass, I go, no. I never, at my level, I never play on grass. So I wouldn't put myself through it. And it wouldn't be a very good demonstration with me taped to a racket and not able to move. Because it wouldn't be Wimbledon grass either, would it? It'd be local club.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
Not being mean about local and grassroots clubs, but it's not kind of the same level as Wimbledon grass is looked after. So I mean, you do find, so the anti-tip I talked about, you will actually, if you go into the technology behind it, that anti-tip on the back of your tear is movable. So you can, because it's one of the things that stop you moving as well on different surfaces. So you can move it to different positions for hard court and clay court and grass court, but it still doesn't make grass any easier to play on, really. It is quite a hard slog. I think it was one of the decisions, one of the reasons that went into, so Wimbledon's decision making this year was that they extended the wheelchair draw by a day. And that was so that, well, in an ideal world, had the rain not stopped play for so many days, it was that they would only play singles or doubles each day. So they were going to do singles, doubles, singles, doubles, singles, because it is quite hard on the body to play on grass. So then when they had to play the men's and quads singles semis on the same day as the men's and quads doubles final was on, I think it went back to the way that it ended up going back to the way it was before they added that extra day. But then equally, if they hadn't added that extra day gave them the flexibility, didn't it? So grass is seen as the hardest surface to push on and play wheelchair tennis.
Where is tennis in the sporting landscape of pioneers, or is it lagging behind other sports for wheelchairs?
No, I think there's lots of people. I mean, even if you look at the generation we have now, Alfie Hewett and stuff like that, the Alfie Hewett and Gordon Reid and Lucy Shuker, who's the British woman, they've been recognised in the King's Honours List. I had to make sure I said King because I still got Queen in my head.
Yeah.
So and then the amount of times I've nearly said Queen when I've done interviews about this. No, the King's Honours List. And they've been honoured for the number of Paralympic medals they've brought back, that's played a part in it. But they've also been honoured for what they do for tennis. Like, one thing I will say about wheelchair tennis players, wherever they come from in the world, there is a passion there to get more disabled people playing tennis.
Mm-hmm.
Because whatever you talk to them about, the trophies are great and stuff, but you talk to them and they even talk about the benefits beyond the trophies that tennis has given them, that sport's given them, full stop. So you've got trailblazers, you have got KG Montjane, who in South Africa she's everywhere. She's like a little media lovey. She's like one South African sportswoman of the year for so many years. When she won Roland Garros, I had a joke for her, and I had to joke with her, and I said, that's another award for you this year. But that's actually quite nice to see a woman becoming the leading light, a female player becoming the leading light in the sport. You look at Shingo Kunieda, an absolute legend. He's retired now, obviously, but he is a mentor to Takito Oda. That's why he's so dangerous, and stuff like that. So you find that people never really leave the want to do that, and even if they're playing, Alfie, Gordon, massively passionate about getting more people playing tennis. Lucy Shuker, 2 days after Wimbledon, we're sitting here tired, talking on Zoom. Lucy Shuker was in a school today, talking about wheelchair tennis and showing wheelchair tennis. Literally, they do so much. The players all around the world do so much to grow the sport and to use their platform to grow the sport, because I think that's one of the criticisms of Paralympic sport in general, is that you
Okay.
have these elite level athletes. I don't know
Mhm.
whether it's a debate in other countries, but in here you have the Paralympics come around and you have these elite level athletes, and it's how you make those performances that you see on TV translate to participation at grassroots level. And so far we haven't found the magic formula. It just seems that there are a number, I don't know what it's like in other countries, but there are a number of political factors that affect that here in the UK. There's a lot of fear among disabled people because our benefit system, I don't want to get too political, but it is a real intake in it. Our benefit system in the UK is quite harsh. I go through it. Um, I'm a wheelchair user. I'm a full-time wheelchair user, and I've been told at my PIP assessment that I don't have a mobility problem because I can understand a sat nav, which is ridiculous. Um,
Mm.
because of the harshness of that system, and so many people end up going through appeals. The fear is that if they take part in sport, they'll be judged as more able in their everyday life. If they say to a PIP, we have it's called personal independence payment. If they say to a PIP assessment, I play sport for 4 hours a week, their fear is that they lose their benefits. And when they lose their benefits, they lose their care, they lose their adapted vehicles that help them get round. So there's a real fear in that. There's a kind of a political element here in the UK as to why so many people aren't maybe taking up sport. There's also a fear that you've maybe had a bad experience in sport previously and you don't want to try again. I mean, there's loads of ways that you can get in sport. I mean, for me, I'm quite a part of quite an inclusive tennis club, so I'm the only wheelchair player at my club. But all of the standing players, they will happily have a hit with me. They'll happily have me in social. They'll happily have me in their coaching sessions. This is not a problem. I coach and referee some of the kids. There's not a problem. But I know that's, what, I probably live in a perfect world of inclusion at my tennis club. I know that does not happen everywhere.
Mm.
And it's also about distance and can they get public transport or an accessible way to get to venues and stuff. So I think a lot of the things that need to be worked out are logistical, and yes, political, but you can't say that the wheelchair tennis players aren't doing their best. They are. I mean, I know Alfie is really passionate about creating great grassroots experience for disabled people. It's one of his passions, and so it's kind of like there are other things that come into account, but obviously because I don't know the benefit system and stuff like that in other countries, it's difficult me to say that that's worldwide. But speaking from the UK, it's kind of the problems and the barriers that people taking part in disability sport or wanting to take part in disability sport want to. I mean, if I take me, when I had my car accident, I was told by doctors, no, you'll never play tennis. You'll never do that. You never do that. Don't be stupid. Okay. So that's a doctor telling me that. And then I'm a bit stubborn. So I went, you know what? You tell me I can't do it. I'm going to try. Um, and and that's quite a familiar story that I hear from other people as well. I think it's there's so many factors that go into participation and so many things that influence whether you can participate. Cost as well, with the cost of living crisis. Can you, as a disabled person, especially in the UK, afford to? I mean, it's not. I always say to people, I pay £60 a year for my tennis club membership, which allows me free access to a tennis courts all year round. So it
Mhm.
works out at like £5 a month. But even for some people, especially nowadays with all these prices rising, £5 a month can be, can make a difference between whether somebody eats
Yeah.
or at home. So I think the thing we don't realize with disability sport, and because of the extra expense of chairs and stuff like that, it's also I know sport and politics shouldn't mix, isn't it? The thing, but it is a political
It's
thing.
society. That's
Yeah,
the word I use,
society as
Gemma.
well. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so there's so many things that aren't looked at as barriers that should be. I'm quite adamant that everybody should be given a chance to take part in sport, whether they have a disability or not. Because for me, I talk about it, the benefits it brings for mental health and everything is, there's nothing greater than if you've had a really, really rubbish day, just getting on a tennis court and hitting a tennis ball. I mean,
Yeah.
even when, like, if I've had a day when my boyfriend annoys me, I just get on the court and hit a tennis ball and imagine it's him. Uh, and And he's actually sat in the corner just laughing because he knows I'll just be like, I'm going to play tennis. So I think it's not even like that. It's the release that taking part in sport gives you. I'll never play at Wimbledon. I'll never be good enough to play at the Paralympics, but I can get on a court and really enjoy myself and have that social community as well.
Well, unfortunately, so few of us will ever be able to grace the courts of Wimbledon. But somebody who did in the quads with a large amount of success, as Almino is mentioning in the chat, is Vink. Almino suggesting that he looked unstoppable this year, and I know that we must have a quick word on the quads before we bring this episode to a close. So give me a word or two on Vink.
Yeah, I'd agree that he looked unstoppable. I mean, if you think in the semi-finals, Heath Davidson from Australia had an amazing win against Sam Schroeder, played the tennis of his life. And I would say I watched that quad singles final, and actually Heath wasn't really doing much wrong. Niels was just on another level, a bit like Taquito is at the minute. He just, the tennis he played in that quad singles final was like nothing I've seen him play before. Actually, um, it was brilliant to see. I loved watching it. It was really exciting, and seeing him do what he was doing, I felt a bit for Heath.
Yeah, it
But
was a comfortable win in the end, wasn't it?
yeah, it was a comfortable win, and it wasn't. Do you know what? And that's the thing. Sometimes, I mean, you always say in tennis, you can always control what you do, but you can't control what the other person does. And if Niels Vink comes out and plays the way that Niels Vink played at Wimbledon in that final, I mean, even when he was playing Andy Lapthorne in the quarterfinals, you were watching him throughout the stages going, where is this grass court tennis coming from? Because, last year he had disappointment. He got beaten by Sam, fellow Dutchman, and his doubles partner in the final. And you were like, this is a completely different Niels Vink to what I watched 12 months ago.
Are there any other Wimbledon stories that you'd like to highlight, by the way?
Wimbledon stories. I think it's the step forward that's been taken. I think I mentioned it anyway, but the step forward that's been taken on putting them on the show courts. I think that was really good. Actually, Wimbledon as well. If you're like listening and you ever want to go to Wimbledon, Wimbledon have some great new access things on the site. So if you want to go as a spectator, they have a quiet room. So if you do get overwhelmed by noise and stuff like that, I mean, I used it once because I have a hearing impairment, and ambient sound really affects and starts giving me headaches because I'm having to listen a lot harder. And so I used it once. It was quite good. I got away from all the noise and then came out and I was like refreshed. Everywhere's now got ramps. There's wheelchair seating on every court now. And some developments are coming is they're gonna introduce a sensory room as well at the championships for people to go into. So they're innovating off court as well. And I know that for a lot of disabled spectators going to a major sport event like that, where there's tens of thousands of people on site at any one time, it helps to know that is there. I mean, even the queue. I don't know whether people know that if you go as a wheelchair user or somebody with a disability, you don't have to stand and camp out in the tents, because I think that people probably think, I can't camp out, I'm a wheelchair user.
Yeah.
They actually have, at the start of the queue, you go to what's called the accessible queue. And you ask to go join the accessible queue. You're still the same number in the line of the queue. You don't get to push in or anything, but they have it's covered area where there's seating. So for people who are ambulant disabled and they use walking sticks, or they can't stand for a long time, they can sit there and it's kind of a bit more of a comfortable experience for them than camping out in the middle of Wimbledon Common. And so I think the innovations Wimbledon are making off court as well to make the whole experience more comfortable for disabled spectators, whatever their disability is. So I'd say if you sat there at home and said, I don't know whether I can go because I don't know whether it's for me and whether it's accessible, definitely give it a go, because like I say, they're adding new things every year and to help make it easier for people.
For those of you tuning in, make sure you give Gemma a follow on Twitter. I'm just sharing her handle there. Gemma, I think it's time for me to put a pound in my electric meter because, as you can see, I've just been gradually getting darker throughout this
I love that
episode.
the lights have gone off. It's like
The light is about 2 meters away from my hand, but apart from once I was interviewing someone and my battery died on my laptop, and I just left this guy who I've never met before, and he was just. I watched the replay back, and it's like, for about a minute, he's just going, "Hello, is anybody there?" But anyway, I need to turn the lights on because I'm an hour ahead of you. I'm in Germany, Gemma. So that's the first thing I need to do. Secondly, I need to let you, conserve your energy so you can start whacking a tennis ball again, whether you're having a good day or not. But also, Gemma, I want to say a big thanks for you for coming on today. But would be great to have you on again, maybe later on in the year, and we'll maybe chat a bit about the US Open and maybe just the year as a whole, and hopefully one or two more steps forwards in the wheelchair game.
fantastic. Yeah, more than happy to do that.
Great. Thanks, Gemma. Oh, and by the way, just give us one more reminder as to sort of who you are and where we can find you, not just on Twitter, of course.
Yeah, so I've joined the other side as well. I'm on Threads, same thing.
Oh,
G
yeah, I've heard
Stevenson
of that
Sport. I
thread
know.
thing.
I've joined the competition. I don't know whether I should. You know what was really annoying about that is I just had all my social media planned for the whole of Wimbledon done, and then Instagram decided to introduce Threads 3 days
Mhm.
before the wheelchair tennis draw, and I was like, I've now got to spend the next 3 days learning a whole new social media platform. I kind of used it like Twitter. I think that's how you're meant to use it. There is one annoying thing about it. You can't use alt text, so you visually impaired users, when you put a
Mm.
picture up, you can't use alt text on it. So please sort that out, Threads. That's my plea to them. But yeah, no, Threads, Instagram, and Twitter. I am on at G Stevenson Sports. So you can find me across all of those. I tend to do, if you're in the UK, I don't know whether you can get them abroad, but I do tend to do a bit of tennis analysis around the Grand Slams on BBC local radio.
Okay.
And I do write bits for the ITF as well. So on their website, often when I'm at the Grand Slams, they get me to do write bits and bobs. So check out the ITF website and you can see some of the stuff I've done. And yeah, there's lots of different places you can find me. I actually do coach a load of kids, and I found out the other week that they'd been Googling me because they'd started in the middle of me teaching them. So I teach performing arts as well, and in the middle of me teaching them a scene, like a scene in a song, they started quoting my interviews back at me. And
Okay.
I was like, how, what? And they were like, oh, we Googled you. And I was like, they were like, it's all right. We've done it to the other teachers. So it's fine. And I'm like sitting there going through my Instagram going, what have I had in my Instagram in the last past
Yeah.
year? So yeah, no. So apparently you can Google me too. I didn't know this. I've never tried to do it. But 14-year-olds told me they had. So
Is your Instagram, by the way, your handle, is it the same as the one here we
yes.
see for your
So
Twitter?
so Instagram handle is the same. I try to keep it
Okay,
all the same, just so
great.
people
Good
can
idea.
find me everywhere. I do use
Yeah.
Instagram. So Twitter's kind of my professional one, where I tell you, give you updates on the tennis and actually use technical analysis. Instagram, on my Instagram stories, you will get backstage stories of what coffee I'm drinking while I'm
Yeah,
sat on
yeah.
court.
My Instagram is Talking Tennis TT, but yesterday I was in a coffee shop and there was a rack, one of these sort of magazine racks, and it was like hugely sort of advertising magazines here, and there were no magazines there. So I decided to just take a picture of that and share it with the world. But and there might be another one of me just drinking a glass of wine, looking moody somewhere, or yeah. So I try to stick to tennis, but every now and again, you know.
Yeah, I'm known for coffee. Like during the pandemic, I did a podcast, which actually you can still check out. It's called The Constant Cheerleader. So I used to be a professional cheerleader, and it was interviewing a lot of women in sport and business and the arts. And it was called Have a Cuppa with Gemma, because I am literally famous for drinking coffee. I could drink coffee every hour of the day, and
Giving you that
often.
energy to whack those balls that we mentioned
Do you know
earlier.
what I mean? I'm not sure. Yeah, my doubles partner actually said to me, I've never played tennis with you without you having had a coffee first." And I just looked at her deadpan and went, "You never want to."
Okay, Gemma, big thanks, and I hope we cross paths again later on this year.
Definitely. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Gemma. Now I'm going to play us out with the usual drill to remind everyone what you have to do. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.